Welcome to the Misophonia Podcast. This is Season 4, Episode 15. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This is a special emergency episode just recorded a couple days ago with Mercede Erfanian, one of the co-authors of the very recent paper, The Motor Basis for Misophonia, which was led by Dr. Sukhbinder Kumar over in the UK. Mercede has been studying the neuroscience of misophonia for years and has many projects in the works to answer even more questions. We talk all about the most recent results of her work and others researching the neuroscience behind misophonia, misokinesia, and tactile sensitivities as well. She explains all of this in a way that I think is very approachable to non-scientists. We also talk about the connection between psychology and neuroscience, comorbid conditions, the neuroscience of ASMR, and a lot more. We even get a peek at how she got into researching misophonia. Please check the show notes for links to how to follow and contact Mercede. She's very approachable, and she's just interested in helping anyone suffering with this. On Twitter, she's Mercede E82, and you can also just for her, and links will come up. Don't forget to follow this show on social media as well, at Misophonia Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, or just Misophonia Show on Twitter. You'll help reach more people if you also leave a quick rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. All right, I want to get right into this. My conversation with Mercede Erfanian. Welcome, Mercede. Dr. Erfanian, it's great to have you here on the show. Very much been looking forward to it. I know the listeners have as well.
Thank you so much.
So I guess, we have a lot to cover, but maybe just very briefly, do you want to just give a little background of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was trained as a clinical psychology, and then I moved on to affective neuroscience, and science which focuses on mood and anxiety disorders. And finally, I ended up working on misophonia at University of Amsterdam because it was sort of connected with my area of expertise. Since misophonic sufferers experience a lot of emotional distress that we sort of study in affective neuroscience. And through misophonia, I sort of was hired by University College London to work on a fully funded, let's say, project on soundscape indices, which studies sound perception in human in context of urban areas.
Gotcha. Okay. Things like planes flying overhead and whatnot, and kind of general urban disturbances and annoyances.
Yeah, that is correct. What we do in soundscape indices is to understand how acoustic environment affect on humans' behavior. Mm-hmm. And what I do within that project is to understand the physiological and neurological underpinnings of sound perception. For example, what happens to our autonomous nervous system when we're exposed to loud sounds and mechanical sounds or natural sounds. And gotcha. Autonomous nervous system is a system that activates when we are in danger.
Gotcha. Yeah, very. That's definitely anyone with misophonia would recognize that. Do you want to now maybe we want to get to the study, but do you want to talk about your maybe definition of misophonia itself, and as we lead into kind of some of the research you've done?
Yeah, sure. This is not really my definition. This is a consensual definition that a bunch of experts from different disciplines and backgrounds sat together and sort of came to an agreement that this is the best definition that we have. Misophonia is best characterized as a disorder that shows decreased tolerance to very, very specific sounds. So it is a disorder, it's not a condition, neither a syndrome. We have to recognize misophonia as a disorder. However, it's not officially classified in any reference. I mean, it's neither in, for example, DSM, a diagnostic and a statistical manual of mental disorders, or any reference book of, for example, audiology. There are a number of trigger sounds that we have identified for people suffering from misophonia. According to our study in 2017, the worst trigger sounds are lip smacking, gum chewing, and crunching. However, I have to say that misophonic sufferers have reported a wide range of triggers, and they are not limited to only sounds, but also they have reported to have visual and even tactile triggers. Visual triggers like seeing somebody that is moving the legs, or for example, blinking very fast or snapping fingers. And tactile triggers are like as if somebody just keeps tapping you on the back or touching your hand.
And for the visual triggers that we've talked about misokinesia as the term a lot on the podcast, is that the correct term to use for those visual triggers?
Yeah, misokinesia.
Gotcha. And would the tactile triggers be under the same term, or does that have its own term?
No, no, there is no term for it as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, misokinesia also, if I'm not mistaken, was first proposed by Arjen Schroeder from the University of Amsterdam. But like I said, it's way less frequent than sound triggers.
Yeah, it seems to be something that actually, at least anecdotally, people seem to start off with the sound triggers, but then those visual triggers get added on sometime later in life. They seem to develop later. But
yeah, if I explain the findings of our recent study, yeah, it would give you best answer for misokinesia. And also we have found a number of negative emotions in people with misophonia that are anger, disgust, aggression, fear, and less frequently anxiety. But we do not see that much of anxiety because fear and anxiety actually are we call it distinguishable or a distinguishing diagnosis between phobia and misophonia, which are completely different things. And we have a couple of studies that looked into the physiology of misophonia, that what happens in our autonomous nervous system or involuntary responses our body when we are exposed, it suffers basically, are exposed to trigger sounds. What we detected are very much similar to the responses that people show when they are very much scared or they are in fatal danger, like palpitation and sweating, and they feel blood rushes into their head, or they might, for example, feel that somebody is pushing them in the chest. They have hard time breathing. There are two studies. One has been done by Sukhvinder Kumar in 2017. It was published, and another one was published in 2013 by Mirad Edelstein and the entire team. And they found, for example, people with misophonia show increased skin conductance response when they are exposed to trigger sound. And what does the skin conductance response do exactly, or what does it indicate? Is the activity or the activity of our skin and opening the sweat glands that are underneath the skin. And this is the indication of autonomic nervous system, like I said again. And it activates or overactivates when we are scared or we are in danger. And also, Sukhvinder Kumar looked at the activation of heart rate, and they found, or heart, and they found people with misophonia show increased heart response or heart rate in response to misophonic sounds. There have been. Do you have any question?
no. Yeah, listening intently, and yeah, that kind of matches a lot of people's experiences.
And the brain basis of misophonia. There have been like a bunch of studies, like 4 or 5, that look into the brain of people suffering from misophonia. The first one was done in University of Amsterdam, which was not peer reviewed, but I would like to talk about it very briefly here. They found people suffering from misophonia showed activation of two different parts of the brain. One of them is amygdala, which is deep in the middle of the brain, and it's
The
very
emotional
important.
part of the
Exactly, which
yeah.
is a very, very important of emotional brain or limbic system that is responsible for regulating fear and panic emotions. And also they found the overactivation of auditory cortex, which is responsible for regulation of or interpretation of auditory inputs. In the other study, 2017, by Sukhbinder Kumar, he also added to what the first study did. And they found not only auditory cortex, but also there is another cortex, like a little bit deep in the brain, is overactivated, which is called insula. And insula is responsible for emotion processing, for saliency, and I will explain what salience is, and for interoception, extraception, and proprioception. And what is saliency? Saliency is basically or what this insula does is it is responsible for understanding the stimuli in the environment that stand out. For example, a loud sound that is way louder than the background sound.
So it's kind of like the part of the brain that looks for the signal amongst the noise, maybe in your environment, like
You
the
can say
important
that.
things around you. Yeah.
Yeah, you can say that. Or for example, if you're looking for a specific color and a specific number among all other numbers or a lot of other colors, that a specific color, that number stands out and is different from the rest. So that part of the brain is responsible for detecting what stands out and is different from the rest. And also,
Is it what's different from the rest, or kind of what's more important than the rest, or maybe
no,
kind
that's
of
more. No, that's selective attention. No,
okay,
what's different from the rest?
gotcha.
Yeah. And also, like I said, insula is responsible for interoception, and interoception is awareness of your internal body changes. For example, sometimes we feel that the movement inside of our belly, or for example, heart rate, or some other changes in our abdomen area. And people that have higher interoception are more aware of these changes in their body. And we found this part of the brain, insula, is overactivated in misophonia. And the other part that Arjen Schroeder and his colleague found was cingulate cortex, and cingulate cortex is also very, very close to insular cortex, and it is responsible for more or less the same function, and that was also overactivated in people with misophonia. And not only Sukhbinder Kumar and Arjen Schroeder found insula was overactivated, but also they found insula was over-connected with a couple of other brain regions like prefrontal cortex, hypothalamus, amygdala, and premotor cortex.
And so I guess this kind of led to is this kind of what led to Dr. Kumar and the team to maybe zone in on the motor cortex, because that seems it kind of it makes sense that all these other parts of the brain are more sensitive in folks with misophonia, but the counterintuitive part is this connection to the motor cortex.
Yeah, exactly. It took us by surprise, to be honest,
Yeah.
because we used to think misophonia is all about audition, and it's all about, for example, the overactivation or overcommunication of auditory cortex with other parts of the brain. But this totally turned everything, and now we know that it's not all about sound, and it might have something to do with mirror system. But I would like to explain in details what we found step by step in this study, and what are its or their implications for hopefully future treatment strategies.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe you'll mention mirror neurons, but when I first read the new study, I immediately started to Google mirror neurons and realized that there was kind of history there, and going back to the 80s, and there was thinking that the mirror neurons would actually affect a lot of different things other than misophonia. So yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, or at least in the context of the new study. That seems like an interesting concept that maybe a lot of people aren't unaware about.
Yeah, of course. So in our recent work, we have observed that, first of all, we had two groups of people, misophonic versus control group, and we found that misophonic sufferers, one, have overactivated premotor cortex that controls, and premotor cortex controls the movement of our throat, lips, and face, and all facial activities that we have, even when we swallow things. And the second thing that we found was not only premotor cortex was overactivated, but also it was hyperconnected or hyper communicative with auditory cortex. And this basically over communication happened when people were listening to trigger sounds. Also, we found that the increased activation of premotor cortex was associated with the emotional distress of the disorder when people were confronted with sound triggers. And what does that mean? It means that the more emotional distress the sufferers were manifesting, the more activated or overactivated that part of the brain, or aka premotor cortex was.
Okay, so the more they were reacting to the trigger, it seemed like it was kind of proportional to how overactive the premotor cortex was.
Yeah, which makes sense. This is
Yeah.
the difference between psychology and neuroscience. Neuroscience basically looks at those responses in the brain, and psychologists look at the behavior or magnitude of the behavior of people. So yeah, like you said, they were proportionally connected or associated with each other. We also found that there was an increased connection between premotor cortex and insula, which I already explained what it is responsible for. When people with misophonia were at resting state, it means they were not really listening to any trigger sounds. And finally, we found the same abnormal pattern or hyperconnectivity between premotor cortex and visual cortex, which is in back of our head, that can explain misokinesia.
Right. Okay. Did anything you find kind of suggest why things start with misophonia generally, at least anecdotally, and then misokinesia kind of gets layered on at some point later?
Yeah, that's a good question, but we really need more research to understand when it happens and how it happens, because we know for sure that the misophonia onset is triggered by or a facial trigger or a facial sound, which has something which is related to mouth, nose, or facial activities. But at some point, it seems this trigger sound sort of leaked into non-orofacial activities, because we know that there are a lot of human unrelated, I don't know if it's a right, but non-human related sound.
Yeah,
that
right.
report, like pen clicking, I don't know, when water tap drips for hours, or I don't know, ventilation, and a lot of other environmental noise that people have reported, people with misophonia have reported. But I don't know when this happens. We know through which mechanism they learn or they sort of associate all these triggers to each other, and it's called associative learning, but we don't know when this happens.
Yeah, I was going to say association is interesting, because I was going to say with, water dripping, even pen clicking, it's and people have literally said like repetitive sounds bother them, and you can maybe make a case for like the visual triggers can kind of be associated almost temporally to sound ones, because after a while your brain maybe gets used to the idea that you're going to get a sound trigger. If you get a sound trigger, there is a visual component attached to it. So it's linked in that way as well. I'm wondering if there's a part of the brain, and this could be, I'm sure this is future research, but I'm wondering if you guys have maybe thought about whether or whether it's a part of the brain, or maybe you have indication of something that can detect
Yeah,
repetitive
we
sounds. And
believe that
yeah,
everything happens in the brain,
yeah,
so it's not going to be out
right,
of the brain. Yeah, but we don't know exactly which part of the brain is yeah, I can guess is prefrontal cortex, since it is responsible for high level functioning, like cognition, that involves reasoning, decision making, attention, and so on. But I cannot really answer this question for sure. We need, like we said, more investigation in the future. Hopefully, we will know how this associative learning happens.
right. Can you talk about that? You were saying that during in a restive state there was an overactivation between I believe the insula and the premotor cortex. So that are you
That is,
saying? I'm just curious how you discovered that in people with misophonia and what that means.
yeah, we just simply put them in, well, not simply, but we put them in fMRI, and uh, yeah, we take lots of images from their brain why they are not listening to trigger sounds, and we could understand that there are some structural connectivity, because we have functional connectivity and a structural connectivity, that there was a structural connectivity between these two parts. I'm not going to go through scientific jargons here,
Yeah,
but I hope
that's
it is
fine.
clear. Yeah, I try to explain it as simple as possible that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah,
Something else that I needed to say: what we know for sure about the triggers, no matter they are visual, auditory, or tactile, that, as you also mentioned implicitly, they are all repetitive and pattern based. This is all we know about the triggers. But my own project, hopefully after Soundscape Indices, is to understand that's how and why these sounds, what is also common between orofacial sounds and non-orofacial sounds, by decomposing all these sounds and look at different acoustic properties of these sounds and see what they have in common.
gotcha. Interesting. So, doing FFTs and kind of breaking down frequency components, maybe in harmonics and things like that, and trying to
Absolutely,
attach.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, you know very well that there are so many acoustic properties that you can extract from a signal, auditory signal, and the more important ones are like loudness, as you said, frequency, and we call it pitch, means the
yeah.
perception of frequency, and sharpness and roughness, fluctuation of strength, and a lot more. And yeah, this is what I'm going to look at, and also measure different responses, like the pupil diameter, or possibly then the brain oscillation, and see how they are connected with those specific parameters, acoustic parameters.
Interesting. Yeah, I have an audio engineering background, so I'm just super interested in
Oh,
this
that's
aspect of
great.
it.
That's great. Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably know, like, I think somebody in Dr. Rosenthal's group is trying to put together a library of sounds that are triggers and for potential
Yeah,
as a
I'm their
data set.
collaborator.
Okay, yeah, I figured. That's awesome. That's great. So I'll be definitely following that. Actually, that brings me to one of my later questions is like, um, as you guys are doing this work, is there how can people help? Kind of put it bluntly. I know that a lot of richer people are able to make anonymous donations to funds. Are there ways that general people can help out, either as participants or in any other way? 'Cause I'm
That's a
sure
good
people.
question.
Yeah,
Since you asked this question, I would like to give an honest answer. Like majority of researchers that have worked on misophonia, like myself, have never made a cent from doing this research. And the reason why misophonia is getting more money and getting more fund is because of Milken Institute
right.
through the Ream Foundation. And since 2018, they have started a project that basically funds 5 to 10 different projects per year that focus on misophonia. And that's the only source of income, that a potential source of
Hmm.
income that researchers working on misophonia might have. And that is all. And of course, donations are fantastic. It would support the research, and it would support the researchers to go on. But I think the best way is to get in touch with researchers and participate in the studies.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll have definitely your contact info, and maybe I'll try to just kind of post in general, like contact info for various groups, especially yours, just for people to reach out. It seems like everyone I've contacted has been very responsive, including yourself generously, and Dr. Kumar, and it's great to see that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate. And also, there is something that I would like to say. The thing is, what we do is to help people, just simple. And that's the reason why I am very much available to in all sorts of social medias, and to basically answering people and raising awareness and teaching people what misophonia is. And this is not something that they only experience, and they should not really suffer in silence. I also, since I do not work in the UK as a clinician, I try to connect these people with experts that I know that work with or treat or try to help people to control their emotional distress related to misophonia. So whoever that is listening to this podcast, please get in touch. I'll do my best, and we will do our best to connect them with people that can help.
Yeah, that's very important, and thank you for that. Yeah, and I can, maybe one reason why it's great to see that they're reaching out to do that, because as you know, a lot of us we're just we've programmed ourselves to bottle up our emotions because we are made to feel whether externally or internally that our feelings are stupid. We shouldn't feel this way. This is a normal. Yeah. This is probably, we should just get over it. And so I think it's probably taking a little while to kind of get over some of that, and I feel like hopefully it's starting to do that. And with folks like yourself who are trying to help, I think it's benefiting people, and people are starting to finally get some help.
Yeah, because we know how debilitating misophonia can get, especially people that suffer from severe and extreme level. It's terrible, and it can affect all aspects of their life. That's why I strongly believe that the first step is to raise awareness, is to tell the family of sufferers and also relatives and people around them and friends that this is a real disorder. It should be recognized. That people with misophonia should not be mocked. People with misophonia should not be told that, yeah, get over it, and you're just silly. This is very stupid, and it's not correct. This is not true, and it does not solve any problem. And people should accept that this is a serious disorder, and they respect the privacy of sufferers. For example, if they want to eat alone, if they want to stay in the bedroom for hours, if they do not want to be in contact with other people, it should be understandable.
Yeah, totally agree. One thing I wanted to, I know you probably have maybe some notes of things you else want to cover, but before I forget, I want to, you said you're connecting folks with clinicians. You're in a kind of a neuroscience background, and obviously there are therapists and in the field. I'm just curious, like, what is the relation between neuroscience and and psychology? I think a lot of people reading about research, maybe who have misophonia, think maybe I should just wait for the science to solve itself, and then there'll be some kind of a cure. But in the meantime, folks need to get help. Like, how do you? What's the line between? Are they related? And does one inform the other, or are they? Some people might think that they're totally separate.
That's a very good question. I was in a discussion this morning. I was talking about the difference between psychology and neuroscience, and I'm happy that you asked. Psychology and neuroscience are the same thing. They are basically two sides of the same coin. But the way that they reason and they understand the problems are different. They basically use different methodology and different approaches. The approach of psychology is deduction, and the approach of neuroscience is induction. But they always solve the same problem. For example, psychologists look at my behavior and understand whether or not I am emotionally distressed, or, for example, I am under so much stress, or I am scared, or I'm panicking, or I have any other affective problems. And neuroscientists do not necessarily look at your behavior, but they look at your brain directly. And then based on the activity and what's happening in your brain, they can provide a solution, or they can provide an understanding that since these parts of the brain are activated or underactivated or overactivated, it means that we can guess the person is behaving in a certain way. So neuroscience and psychology sort of complement each other. They're not really different from each other.
Right. So you're looking more at kind of objectively at the structure and the function of the brain, the physical brain itself, where a psychologist is it's specific to the person and their behaviors and trying to change the behavior.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Psychology is more about subjective data, and neuroscience is more about objective data. But if you look at majority of universities, you'll see that the department of psychology and neuroscience are together because they complement each other.
Gotcha. And in your studies, are you also um, getting information about the back? I'm assuming you're to some degree, but the background of the participants, because there's a lot of people come on and they talk about how, for example, their specific trauma that they had growing up, and so a question comes up is trauma something that it triggers the condition or activates the condition of people at some age around late elementary school, puberty, or are there comorbid conditions? I'm curious if you're gathering that data as well as you're studying the brain of your participants.
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on the question that we ask, or the objective of this study. For example, in our study 2017, we asked all sorts of questions. For example, when they feel they were first triggered by the
Yeah.
sound, or for example, if they have anybody in their family with the same symptoms, if they have a history of psychiatric disorders, if they have ASMR or autonomous sensory meridian response, that I'm pretty sure you're familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
if they have synesthesia, or for example, how they feel when they are triggered, or what are the bodily changes, and what are the coping strategies, and what is, for example, the first negative emotion that they show. So we ask all sorts of questions, but in the study we did this year by Sukhbinder Kumar and his team, we did not ask these questions. We just simply ask whether or not the participant would like to go on with the study, which is a very important part of the procedure of the study, their gender and their age.
Gotcha. Just basic questions, and then you get right
Very
into the
basic questions.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually,
Demographic questions, I would say.
right. One thing you mentioned actually, it was very interesting that has come up a lot is the other family members that may be showing symptoms, because I've spoken to quite a few people who were like, actually my mom or dad, now that I think back, my mom or dad or my aunt was definitely, or was definitely misphonic, or was showing signs, but back in the 50s, 60s, sometimes stuff was, if it's not talked about now, back then it was definitely not talked about, so it was harder
Yeah.
to tell. But have you thought about a potential genetic or hereditary component to this?
Since there is no findings,
Right, there were no studies back then.
yeah, no, I can just speculate a little bit based on the subjective data that we collected. In one of our studies, we collected data from 302 participants, and we found, yes, like more than, if I'm not mistaken, 40% of our participants reported they have at least one family member with the same symptoms, and they were mostly female family members. So by their either, for example, in their moms, or in their aunts or grandmothers from one of the sides.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely worthy of further study there. Did that bring the gender issue? Brings up another question. I don't forget if it was you who mentioned or read about. I read about somewhere, or somewhere else, but it seems like it's mainly women who are at least talking about it. It seems like and that definitely shows in the skews in the numbers of guests I have on my podcast. But I'm wondering if are you seeing any difference between genders, or is it just women in general are more open about these mental health issues
Yeah,
than
exactly.
men, and
That's the
that should
point.
change? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the point. The thing is, there are also lots of studies in this regard that it seems women are more open to look for solution or look for professional help online, and men are more closed. And we can understand sort of why that's really
Societally, yeah,
happening.
you're right.
Yeah, exactly. So when we collect data, especially online, we see that like two-third of, mostly two-third of the participants are female participants, but it does not necessarily indicate that it is higher or more prevalent among women.
Okay. I wanted to get into, yeah, I guess I wanted to get into some maybe future research, but I wanted to pause for a second and ask if you had anything else that you wanted to um, expand on from what we've already said so far, maybe from your notes.
Yeah, I guess I missed just a small part, which
Yeah.
is very important, and that's the key finding of this study.
Yeah, I
That
guess that's important.
yeah, the last finding of this study, like I said, was the abnormal pattern or hyperactivity or hyperconnectivity between premotor cortex and visual cortex. And premotor cortex, there is a very, very important system in premotor cortex which is called um, uh, mirror system or mirror neurons. There are a lot of mirror neurons that are responsible, or they are activated when we are looking at somebody doing something as if we are doing that specific activity. So if we, for example, move our hand, that part of the brain or those neurons are activated. And if we look at somebody moving his or her hand, those neurons also are activated. So this is the most important part of this study, and it has lots of implications for the future research and also for the potential therapeutic strategies.
Right. So I think people can kind of relate to that, especially in terms of like when you yawn. Oh, when you see somebody yawn, it usually makes
Exactly.
you yawn.
Exactly.
And
That's a great example. Yeah.
for sound, though, let's say if my eyes are closed and I hear somebody chewing, I get set off. So is does the mirror neurons get activated not just visually, but also it seems like through the auditory?
Yeah, exactly. Like you
Yeah.
said, we also found over connection between
Hmm.
premotor cortex and auditory cortex. So it doesn't matter if you see it or you hear it. The
Or
mirror
feel it.
neurons
Yeah.
are active or feel it. Yeah, but about feeling, we have not have any findings. Hopefully in the future, but what I can tell you is regarding the auditory triggers and visual triggers, which explains some of the coping strategies that
Yes.
the misophonic people have. Like again, back to our study 2017, because we collected lots of data. That's why I can just keep going back to that paper. We also asked people what their coping strategies were, and the most common coping strategy by misophonic people was mimicry, and the over connection between premotor and the visual cortices can explain this, why people mimic the sounds. For example, if you see somebody opening a bag of chips, or for example chewing a gum, you mimic that sound or you mimic that behavior sort of to calm down the overactivation of abnormal overactivation of the premotor cortex.
Yes, and that's been one of the most interesting things is like all these people who've bottled up their condition for so long, never spoken to anyone else about it, all somehow have this similar coping mechanism of mimicking. And this is the
Like
first,
a great example. I
yeah,
never thought about that. Like yawning. Yeah, we always say that yawning is contagious, but that's not really the thing. But
right, right,
that's a great example. Yeah, somebody
yeah,
yawns, we yawn.
yes, yeah. This is the first study that definitely explained. That was kind of an aha moment for me when I read this study. Was, oh yes, this explains. Maybe now we're on to something. It seems like, yeah, very interesting. Okay, so yeah, so where do we go from here? This is a lot of, yeah, like you said, this these findings start to point to different directions, but what's next?
Well, to be honest, since I don't know if I will be involved with the next study, I just have a very, very brief information of what Dr. Kumar is going to do in his next study, which is funded by Milken Institute and Ream Foundation. Since we know that misophonia is not all about sounds, he is going to explore more cost-effective brain measurements like EEG or electroencephalography to show the involvement of these mirror neurons in misophonia. And also what he's going to do is to see if TMS or transcranial magnetic stimulation can sort of help interrupt the overactivation of mirror system. And that way people will hopefully experience less distress and less anger and less negative emotions related to misophonia.
Is TMS
But
used
this is the
for any
plan.
other? Yeah, I'm curious if is TMS used for any other treatments for other conditions? I'm just curious what else, kind of where that idea came from.
TMS, yes, TMS is widely used
Okay,
for a lot of disorders. Yeah, yeah.
gotcha. Okay,
One of those disorders is MDD or major depressive disorders, and it's been very, very successful. What it does is to overactivate and underactivate the activity of neurons. So if you give like signals, if you send signals with low frequency, it underactivates neurons, and with high frequency, it overactivates the neurons.
okay, interesting. And is that the kind of treatment that I know the study hasn't even happened yet. I'm just curious, is that the kind of treatment that is that can be done? That has to be done in a clinic or can be done at home?
At home, no,
Okay.
because the device is pretty expensive.
I can't get a kitchen magnet or anything and stick it to my head. Okay.
Well, no, it's not really sticking. It's a device that somebody would hold it above your head.
Right.
It sends, or it changes the magnetic. No, it's transcranial. Yeah, it changes the magnetic field around the brain, and it should be done by an expert and cannot be done by non-trained people.
And you say you may or may not be involved in some of these studies. Are you also looking at some other directions for misophonia, or I'm curious what your research interests will be following this?
Yeah, we have another study that is still under review, but I can just very shortly tell you what we did. And I don't know about my future plans, to be honest, because it's been something that I started in 2014, and I'm very, very interested. But like I said, it really depends on funding, I have to say, because if I do not get fund for future study, we cannot really run any study.
Right.
My plan for future is working on the auditory triggers, but it really depends on if we can get funding for it, and if not, it has to wait.
Gotcha.
And the other study that I did with collaboration of King's College University was that we asked a large number of people what the triggers were, and we divided the triggers in 3 different groups of orificial, environmental sounds, and also some neutral sounds. And we found that people or misophonic people that have high sensitivity to trigger sounds also tend to have high sensitivity to neutral and environmental triggers. By using a complicated statistical modeling, which was very interesting, but it's still under review.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So people they're also more sensitive to neutral sounds as well. Is that similar to like hyperacusis or
No, it's not.
no?
No,
Okay.
the big difference between hyperacusis and misophonia is that hyperacusis is triggered by the physical property of the sound, which is
Mm,
intensity, for example, the loudness. It seems the tolerance threshold, or LDL, we call it, the level of the loudness discomfort level in these people is pretty low. If the loudness discomfort level in normal people is 75 decibel, and whatever that is louder than 75 decibel is unpleasant. It seems it's way lower in people with hyperacusis, but this is not really the same case in misophonia, because sometimes, for example, they listen to super loud sound in their headphones in order to block the misophonic
Right.
triggers.
Right. No, no. Yeah, we all know that it can be the subtlest sound coming like from multiple rooms away that is triggering us.
Exactly, like muffled sounds. That's
Right.
correct. And also, this is something that I would like to add,
Yeah.
that although hyperacusis and misophonia are not the same, but they have high comorbidity. We actually found that for some reason, we don't know exactly why, and if misophonic or misophonia basically would lead to development of psychiatric and non-psychiatric disorders, or those psychiatric and non-psychiatric disorders make sufferers more prone to develop misophonia. Well, we found that misophonia has high comorbidity with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, with MDD or major depressive disorder, with OCD or OCPD or obsessive compulsive personality disorder, hyperacusis, tinnitus, and anorexia nervosa.
Really? Okay. Yeah, the last one's
Yeah,
interesting
it
as
makes
well.
sense because these people may stop eating in order to avoid the
Yeah.
situation. Yeah, avoid the situation that this food is provided and they have to sit on the same table with other people and listen to excruciating triggers.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, the next question I was going to ask is, yeah, other than hyperacusis, what are some other comorbidities? Because that's a lot of times people come on the podcast and they have gone to therapists about these more, quote unquote, popular conditions, and then but they're, usually or often their provider has no idea what misophonia is, and so there's
Yeah.
obviously there's obviously some. It seems to me that most people are comorbid with something else, and it's interesting to hear this list from you, because it's almost like the an episode list of the show here, because it's I don't mean
And
to
it's not
laugh at it,
all,
but
I have to say.
yeah, right.
Yeah, there are some case studies also look into personality disorders, and they found there are some personality disorders like borderline disorders and paranoid personality disorders. A disorder are also have comorbidity with misophonia. And not only that, but also there are some developmental disorders that have comorbidity with misophonia, like autism.
I was going to ask about autism, yes, because
Yeah.
people have
And
asked
also
about
you
that.
see this, yeah, you see this in people with ADHD, with kids with ADHD and kids with tic syndrome,
Tourette's.
Tourette's syndrome. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Another great podcast, by the way, is the Tourette's syndrome podcast, but I'll
Yeah.
just plug that real quick. Yes, super interesting, but especially about kids, because another thing I kind of try to encourage, and I keep meaning to just go to my kids' school district as well, as I would like to kind of talk to counselors at school districts, because I think a lot of stuff misophonia either gets undiagnosed or misdiagnosed as something else, and
Mm.
it can have a huge impact on somebody's
Yeah.
career and earning power and really everything. Um, and I think it's important, like going back to the beginning, to get the awareness out and hopefully have misophonia taken as seriously and intervened early in somebody's life to help them.
Yeah, that's why I really, really appreciate the job that you guys do, because you are the ones that basically make a bridge between researchers and sufferers. And we have to, like you said, raise awareness as much as we can, especially for kids, because well, adults are different. Adults can still cope with the consequences that misophonia have, although it's incredibly difficult. I understand, but for kids, if they get damaged during childhood, it may not be reversible.
Yeah.
And that is the main problem. Imagine a kid that is being bullied or being mocked at school by his or her peers all the time because of the misophonic reaction that he or she has.
Or in many cases, their own
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. exactly.
Yeah, fast. So we're about an hour in, and I want to kind of you can give you a chance to kind of say anything else you want to share with the audience. I do want to ask one question I usually ask at the beginning is, do you have misophonia yourself, or has this just been a research interest for you?
No, I don't have
Okay,
misophonia. No,
okay.
I don't have misophonia. And the reason why I got into misophonia, that might sort of tickle your interest, is that I was working on a research paper about synesthesia. And I was looking for a collaborator in University of Amsterdam. And this lady, Romke Rao, told me that why about synesthesia? There are a lot of research about synesthesia. Why not misophonia? And that was basically the beginning of misophonia research and misophonia interest in me. That's why I don't have misophonia. There is no personal connection with this topic.
Right. And doing the research and reading about triggers that hasn't because a lot of people, who have misophonia, they if they hear about new triggers, they sometimes acquire it. So that is you've never had misophonia, you've never had any symptoms develop. It's just it's not a thing for you at all.
I have to make a confession.
Okay.
Now that you're asking this, I have to tell you, since I started getting to know the concepts and what the disorder is, I have become way more aware of my acoustic environment, one,
Hmm.
and I have become way more aware of the potential triggers that they suffer from, that the misophonic people suffer from. Like if I'm sitting in a train with somebody that keeps sniffing, sniffling, sorry, or I don't know, opens a bag of chips, which is very common, or I don't know, they
Yeah.
take out an apple from their bag and start biting it. Uh, yeah, I sort of become hyper focused on it and say, okay, I'm happy that I'm not misophonic, but
Right, right. Interesting.
tracking
Yeah,
my
it's interesting to hear somebody who's becomes focused but is not about to fly off the handle. That's an interesting. Um, yeah, because yeah, it's interesting to hear somebody that because yeah, we'd love to be in that situation where we can just focus on it, but then you know put it out of our mind or just not be so agitated, have our heart rate go up and our skin
yeah,
start
that doesn't
sweat.
happen. Yeah, but it seems I become very
Hmm.
sympathetic toward people with misophonia. That I'm really happy I'm not misophonic. What if why are people behaving like this? What if a misophonic sufferer was sitting here?
Right.
But yeah, that's the internal dialogue that I have with myself. But I hope I'm not developing misophonia. That's
Have you any kind of interesting stories that you have heard from other misophones in terms of situations that they've been in where you've been like, wow, that's powerful.
not really. But what we found interesting in one of our studies was that half of the participants that have misophonia also had ASMR at the same time. And this is very weird. So it means that those misophonic sounds were annoyed and they hate certain sounds, and they basically became euphoric by listening to other types of sounds.
Okay, so they were so you're saying they were put off by certain sounds, but other similar sounds they were made them very happy, like made them very excited,
Well,
or by the same sounds.
no, not the same sound,
Yeah.
obviously not. No, but different sounds. But ASMR, I would like to explain what it is. ASMR is basically when somebody listens to very specific sounds that are normally soft sounds,
Cranked up.
and they feel, yeah, they feel euphoria, and also they feel a tingling sensation at the back of their neck down to their spine, and they really, really enjoy listening to soft sounds. There are actually lots of videos on YouTube, people providing for ASMRs.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's how we're used to. I guess a lot of people just think of it as ASMR is the name of the sound, the type of sound where it's just, people whispering or yeah. But I'm interested to hear kind of like how it's turned up in studies in terms of. So you're saying that a lot of people with misophonia, aversion to some sounds also get super excited by other sounds.
Yeah, yeah. I can understand the underpinning underlying physiology because of the overactivation between different parts of the brain.
Yeah.
You listen to something and another parts of the brain is activated, which is also very similar to synesthesia. But what is interesting is what are those sounds that they enjoy, and what are those sounds that they hate?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what comes up in Facebook groups or conversations is like, uh, somebody says ASMR, and then we automatically think that they're talking about listening to isolated loud versions of the sounds that tick us off. But I didn't realize that I might have some mystery sounds that are exciting me, and maybe I should look for those, or maybe it'll come up in a study or
Yeah,
something. I can
yeah, and
go through a menu.
we might we might be able to look at this as a potential therapy that
Right.
we make a few changes in those triggers and we turn them to ASMR triggers. That would be great. Then I think a sufferer would sit on a table and I don't know, eat with the family members and not only hate the sound or get annoyed by the sound or the fight and flight response sets off, but also they enjoy the sound. And this is something that I think future research should really focus on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering if, being a hardware and software engineer here, I'm wondering if I can eventually hack into some earbuds where I can not just do simple noise canceling, but do some frequency manipulation where
Exactly.
replace the sounds or activate certain frequencies that you're going to find out in your next very well-funded study about.
Exactly.
So very, very interesting.
That's a very good point. Yeah, exactly. Basically modulates the sound and yeah, sends a not a complete different, but it modulated
Right.
the same trigger, but the modulated way, and they feel euphoric, and I think a lot of people would love that treatment.
Yep. Well, let's maybe end on that positive, hopeful note for the future. But again, I do wanna give you some time here. Is there anything else what final words you want to share with listeners?
No, I think I said everything I had to say, unless I can remember something that I overlooked or missed saying. But I don't think so because I wrote all the outlines here and I think I covered everything. But if
Yeah,
you have
this is
any,
great, and I'll have your contact info, and folks can maybe contact you, or at least on social media. Hopefully, that's so that we can all see. Yeah, again, this has been super helpful. I'm very appreciative that you came on and that you do the research, and I'm hopeful that you'll have a lot of opportunities to take this research forward, and we'll get to some very promising therapies.
yeah, I hope so too. And please wish us luck. And we are there for all the sufferers. And I hope we will come with more effective therapeutic methods very soon.
Thank you again, Merced, so much. I know so many of us are hungry for not only therapies, but just any new information, and we appreciate the work you do. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.